Hi, everybody. This is Bob Puglisi in my office in Santa Fe. I hope you and your families are doing well. We are following the guidelines and social distancing and all of that stuff, trying to stay healthy and stay inside. Today, I'd like to read to you from my novel, Unassisted Living. And many of you might have read this already. It's been a popular book. But it'd be fun to listen to me reading it, I hope. And maybe if you haven't bought it or read it, note this will get you to go out and get a copy. So I'm going to read from, this will be chapter one of the book, and it takes place in 1975 in New York City. The sun's first rays broke the early morning darkness, and the shimmer of daylight silhouetted the Manhattan skyline. A Staten Island ferry floated into its berth and docked. A steady stream of commuters rushed off the boat. Some people headed towards lower Manhattan office buildings and Wall Street. Others descended into the subway, and some stepped onto city transit buses. A New York City daily news truck unloaded bundles of newspapers at one of the newspaper stands in front of the ferry terminal. The bold-faced headline on the front page read, "Seniors Battle City." Commuters coming off the ferry stopped to pick up their copies. In another part of the city, the West Side produce market was abuzz with activity. Men pushed hand trucks with crates and cardboard boxes filled with produce from loading docks onto waiting trucks. Trucks and vans pulled in and out of the market. Traffic in the area was mostly at a standstill, with honking horns and men shouting and cursing at one another as they attempted to get in and out of the market area. A sign over one of the loading docks displayed the name Sambuchi Produce. Several workers loaded a waiting truck with boxes of produce. From the looks of some of the produce, it didn't look edible. Mildred Meyers, a petite, white-haired 70-year-old, came out of the building onto the dock and trailed by Angelo Sambuchi, a large, overweight and balding man in his 60s. Mildred shouted at the men pushing the hand trucks onto the waiting truck. "Stack them tight!" The men nodded politely in her direction. Mildred and Angelo had a long friendship until she retired a few years earlier. Mildred was the bookkeeper for Sambuchi Produce. That entailed also running the office, answering the telephone, taking orders over the phone, helping with inventories, and cleaning. She helped Angelo through good and bad times. Now, occasionally, she came to see how the new bookkeeper was doing and to chat with Angelo. This morning, she was there for another purpose. Angela was very grateful to Mildred for her loyalty through the years and her hard work. This was payback day for Angelo. He stood next to her and squinted his right eye and said, "But you're crazy." Mildred ignored him and glanced at her digital watch with its large, easy-to-read numbers. With steam coming from her mouth on that frigid morning, she looked out at the bottleneck traffic, then at the men loading the truck and said, "Come on, hurry up. We'll never get out of here with this traffic." Then to Angelo she said, "I hope that's the rottenest stuff you got." He raised a hand with his palm and said, "What, I'm going to give you the fresh stuff?" With a smile on her face, Mildred laughed. Angelo leveled his gaze at her and took a serious tone. "Why don't you just move? I got a nice building in Bensonhurst with an empty apartment. I'll take you to see it." "I can find an apartment. It's the principal." "Ah, you and the principal." He waved a hand at her. Mildred looked at her watch again. "If I move anywhere, it's going to be to Hawaii." "Hawaii? You're nuts. What the hell are you going to do there?" "They got warm weather." "What's wrong with New York weather?" She looked at him. "Ange, I can't take this cold anymore." She pulled her coat collar snug around her neck. "You can't win with that Daniels guy. He owns half the city." "Yeah, well, he's just a fat little blowhard. You're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. I don't want to read about you again in the papers tomorrow." Mildred had been an activist all her adult life, maybe even as a child. Just name an issue or an injustice, and Mildred probably protested it. A roadway through Washington Square Park, the bomb, the Vietnam War, women's rights, South African apartheid, civil rights in which she marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She was friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, who stood with Mildred at several protests. Mildred required at an early age her mother Rosie Rabinowitz's energy and spunk. When Mildred's mother suffered a severe bout of pneumonia, 12-year-old Mildred cared for her mom and did all the cooking, cleaning, and caring for her brothers and sisters. The last hand truck emptied its load and exited the truck. Mildred looked around. Who's driving? Angela said, I'm going to drive you. I want to get my truck back in one piece. Mildred climbed into the passenger seat. A little while later, the produce truck made its way slowly through the morning congestion of the Lower East Side. Angelo kept his eyes on the traffic ahead. Mildred glanced at her watch. Angelo looked at his and said, Don't worry, we'll be there soon. Excuse me. As they reached Mildred Street and turned the corner, a barricade of sandbags, furniture, and junk stopped them about halfway down the street. Behind it, elderly men and women stood guard. They dressed in World War II helmets, Army surplus fatigues, football helmets, and shoulder pads. The south side of the street looked like London following the Blitz, with just two tenements standing, an empty lot between the buildings indicating a similar building had once stood there. Nothing but rubble surrounded them. On both sides of the remaining structures, idle bulldozers sat silently, aimed maliciously at the old tenements. There was also a 50-foot-high crane with a steel wrecking ball sitting on the ground just a few feet from the building nearest the blockade. A large white sign supported by two posts said, Daniels Development, no trespassing. 20 or 30 yards down the street, there was another barricade to the right of the furthest tenement. The tenements across the street stood untouched, but for how long, the residents wondered. Between the barricades, 50 or 60 people of all ages milled about, preparing for battle. Mildred stuck her head out the truck window. Get that thing open so we can get through, she shouted to the elderly men behind it. They hopped to it, making an opening just wide enough for the truck to pass. With her head out the window, the truck drove through, and Mildred ordered, And don't let anyone else in. An old man shouted up to Mildred. They said the cops are coming, they're on their way. We'll be ready for them, Mildred called back. And the truck pulled in front of the first tenement. Mildred and Angelo got out. With his hands on his hips, Angelo looked at the building with disdain. All right, everyone help us unload, Mildred directed. The tailgate dropped, and a few younger men wearing camouflage fatigues jumped into the truck and started pushing boxes to the rear. Mildred noticed Angelo staring at her soon-to-be demolished tenement, an old red brick building with an abandoned storefront that had 3 stories and a fire escape above the street level. She came alongside. He turned to her and said, This is what you're fighting for? Without that building between them, they're going to fall down. Mildred knew he was right, but she was not giving up her home of over 30 years without a fight. I told you it's the principle. Angela waved a dismissive hand at her. They looked back to the truck. Old and young people loaded boxes on wagons and supermarket shopping carts and pushed them towards the barricades. Put some in between, too, Mildred instructed at the top of her voice. After they whisked away the last box, Angelo said, All right, I'm getting the hell out of here. You should, too. Mildred gave him a you gotta be kidding look. Angelo said, Yeah, that's what I figured. It's the principle. He laughed and then hugged her. You be careful. You're not young anymore. I'll be fine. Yeah. Mildred turned to a 20-ish Puerto Rican man and said, Open up so you can get out and make sure it's closed tight once he gets through. Gotcha, Mildred. Angelo got into the truck and waited for a passage to open in front of him and then pulled the truck down the street and turned the corner. Thank you. That's the end of chapter 1. I'll be reading chapters 2 and 3, so look for those and maybe you'll enjoy those. Thanks. Bye now.